Microliters are hands down the best nymphing system available right now. Their low mass means that you can fish super light nymphs far away from yourself without having to fight the sag of the leader to make a good drift. However, their low mass also causes one of their biggest issues, which is leader stick. So leader stick is what happens when you get a little bit of water on your rod blank and it forms a thin layer around the outside that your leader then sticks to and makes it very hard to make a good cast. If you're fishing light enough nymphs, you may even be pretty much stuck fishing a fixed line system until the rain stops or the blank dries off. So I'm going to show you guys today how to modify your rod to deal with this issue by doing what we call wrapping the blank. Wrapping a rod basically consists of taking some type of mono or fluoro and spiral wrapping it from the bottom of the butt mid all the way to the tip top. What this does is basically provides some separation between the leader and the film of water on the blank. So it either, can't touch it to get stuck or can't get as deeply stuck, and really makes it feel like there's no leader stick issue at all if you do it right. So I'm going to show you guys how to do it right now. It's pretty simple. All you need besides your rod itself is your mono or fluoro. I recommend mono because it's a little bit less dense than fluorocarbon. You get a little bit less weight. Now, this wrapping technique will affect the action of your rod a little bit. Anytime you add weight to your blank in any way, it does affect the action. So it is probably best to make sure you know how your rod fishes before you wrap it, and then give it a little bit of a test after you wrap it to understand how you've affected the action. Make sure you didn't change it too much in a way you don't like. But if you do it right with mono and don't make the wraps too close together, don't add too much weight, especially near the very tip of the rod, then you'll probably be fine. You probably won't noticeably affect the action here, but I try to do everything I can to avoid doing that. Now, I recommend 6 pound monofilament for this. I found 6 pound or 9/1000ths of an inch is the perfect diameter to give that separation from the blank so that the leader can't stick without having to be wrapped too close together or adding too much weight like a thicker leader would. I'm using Maxima Chameleon today. Doesn't really matter what brand you use, just make sure it's something relatively durable. After that, you're going to need some thread and a bobbin. I'm using Vivus 70 denier black thread. The brand and color really doesn't matter. I do recommend 70 denier. I found it to be a good size for doing stuff like this, but in reality, it doesn't really matter. And then after that, some super glue, whatever you have on hand, and some scissors. Now, to start this out, what we're going to do is grab our monofilament, grab the tag end, and just tie a simple overhand knot in that tag end. And I'm going to cinch it pretty well. And then cut that tag of the knot as close to the knot as possible. So you basically just want a nice little ball on the end of that tippet. After you got that done, just set it aside and then come and grab the rod blank here. Now, I'm holding the rod blank so that this bottom ferrule is facing my hand holding the thread. I'm just going to take the tag of this thread out of the bobbin and I'm going to pinch it to the blank on the side facing me as close to this bottom ferrule as I can. And then I'm going to start these wraps. I'm going to do 5 or 6 wraps, basically right where the epoxy meets the blank itself. Then I'm going to come in with my scissors, find where this tag touches the blank, and I'm going to cut it as flush as I can. Now that I got that secure on there, I'm going to bring my monofilament over, and on the very back of the blank, I'm going to pinch that down and hold it over those thread wraps. And I'm just going to do another 5 or 6 wraps, pretty much right on top of each other, over top of that. When I got those wraps in there, I'm going to just Give that a little pull and bring that knot right up against those wraps I just made. I'm going to bring this thread back behind it, take a bunch of slack out, and then I'm just going to make a couple half hitches, 2 or 3, right at the base of that, right above the epoxy there. And I think you can probably guess we're going to come in with a super glue later, so this doesn't need to be perfect and super tight, just needs to hold until we're done with this process. So after that, take a little bit of slack out of this spool of monofilament, put our scissors down, and now we're going to actually start doing the wrapping of the blank. So how I do this is I use my non-dominant hand as kind of a guide for the leader, and my dominant hand to spin the rod blank. So I flip the rod blank around so that this bottom ferrule is now facing the opposite direction. It's facing my non-dominant hand, and I'm just going to start spinning. And you want these wraps to be around a ½ inch apart. You don't want to do them too close together because then you'll build in a little bit of excess weight, and you don't want to do them too far apart because then your leader is still going to be able to touch that rod blank and it's still going to stick. When you get around these guides, you can alter the width a little bit just to make sure you can get around them. And then when I get about there and I have some room on the other side, I'm going to flip it because it's a little easier to wrap it and spin it with the thicker end of the blank in your dominant hand. And now I'm just going to continue spinning it. I'm putting a good bit of pressure on this monofilament. I'm wrapping it fairly tight, but not, super tight. It's okay if it's got a little bit of slack in there. All right, and we're going to wrap basically to about a ½ inch below the tip top there. Now what we're going to do, flip our blank back to the other side, so that bottom ferrule is again kind of facing the opposite direction. I'm going to hold the mono right here, just kind of pinch it to the blank, and then we're going to cut it just a little bit longer than the tip top is, and we're going to put our spool of mono to the side there. Then we're going to come back in with the thread, and in the same hand that is pinching that mono, we're just going to pinch the thread down. Similarly to before, I'm going to come right behind this epoxy that's holding the tip top on and make 5 or 6 good wraps. Cut that little tag off. Again, you want to situate this mono so that it's towards the spine of the rod. And I'm going to give it another 5 to 7 wraps and cut it as flush as I possibly can. And then on this one, because we cut it, there's that little tag, just going to give it a couple more wraps to cover that up. Then the same thing, bring some slack out and do a couple half hitches. And once you have those thread wraps on and that monofilament secured to the blank, you're pretty much done. You could be done if you wanted, but I'm going to come back in with a little bit of super glue and just make sure that is secure. So you definitely at least want to get this on where you made those half hitches. What I'm going to do is come in with just a little dab towards the back, towards that epoxy, and one on the other side. And I'm going to give a quick spin with my fingers, kind of work it in a little bit. And that should be good. Make sure any thread tags are also held down. Don't need a whole lot of super glue. And I actually used to do this with true rod building epoxy. If you get too much glue on there, you can just take a little bit off. And the problem with actual rod building epoxy is that this mono is not going to last forever. Between, you know, bumping off bridges and rocks and trees and just the general flex of the tip over a couple months, it is going to break at some point. And when that happens, you want to be able to remove these thread wraps pretty easily and get everything off clean, rewrap it, repeat this process again. So that's why I've gone to the super glue, because if you just cut that thread with a razor blade, it peels off pretty well. It doesn't leave too much of a residue on the blank, as long as you don't use too much glue. And you can rewrap it just like new. So with this wrap, you should get probably 6 to 12 months, depending on how much you actually fish. And like I did mention earlier, I do this wrapping on the tip mid, and the butt mid. So those basically upper 3 sections of the rod. The butt has a little bit bigger guides, so that leader is kind of spaced from the blank far enough that it doesn't stick on its own. But those upper 3 sections you are gonna want to wrap. So I do the wraps a little bit further spaced apart the lower I go on the rod. So on the butt mid, you know, they might be double this spacing, and then on the you know, tip mid, it's going to be somewhere in between. But do that, get those upper 3 sections of your rods wrapped just like this, and you'll be good to fish in anything from a monsoon to a light drizzle. Hopefully you guys got something out of this video. If you did, please like and give a subscribe, and I'll see you next time.